So how much of gender stereotyping is biologically influenced? There might be evolutionary adaptiveness of gender stereotypes. There might be an advantage for the society to flourish if males identify with dominance and females with more intimacy, responsiveness, and cooperativeness, with the sheer fact that women actually do carry offsprings and look after them, and the human offspring is very helpless when it's born, and it takes a long time before human beings can become independent, right, of their parents. When you think about children, and when you look at other mammals, we see that that time span is much shorter, right? And so it could also be very much biologically induced as well. But biology is not destiny. Culture also plays a role, especially given that the circumstances have changed quite a bit since our days as hunter-gatherers, right? So there seems to be some cross-cultural similarity which could be taken as evidence for a biological underlying foundation for this. We said the instrumental traits for men and expressive traits for women were very much similar across 30 countries over the past 40 years. But it's nevertheless affected by the culture because we see changes happening. Sweden is a good example where, for example, men are given time off from work to take care of their children. And if they don't use this, I think 2 months out of 18 months, every 18 months or something, if they don't use this, they lose it. So they can't like just, you know, make it roll over to the next year so that one day they're going to have a year vacation. They really have to use it to take care of their children. Another example is from a Kenyan tribe where mothers or women work 4 to 5 hours in the fields. They have large families, and they leave the home in the care of children. But the children might be girls and boys, and both girls and boys are given both stereotypically feminine and masculine jobs. And because they do everything, so boys might be active in cooking and taking care of youngsters, we see less of this extreme way of differentiating men and women in this culture. Yes. And in Sweden, young people view gender traits as learned and domains of expertise rather than inborn traits or rights and duties. Adults hold more favorable attitudes towards maternal employment, and 90% of Swedish fathers take some form of parental leave. This is in stark contrast to many other countries. In our culture, you have 6 months of leave, as you know. Maybe you know. But you can also extend it with many workplaces without losing your job. This is way better than what is happening in the United States, by the way, where they only get 3 months. And that 3 months is just 3 months. It doesn't matter if it's right after the child's birth or before. So if a mother has complications, for example, they may have to take that time off before birth, but that still counts to the clock, and there is no guarantee that your job is going to be waiting for you when you're done. That's the United States. So in terms of that, how that goes, actually, we are not among one of the worst countries in the world for this kind of care. And also, you will have learned, I read and heard it in several places, that now the government pays grandparents to take care of kids. Right? Which is, when I heard it, it made me smile, but then I thought this is not a bad practice. Because in reality, many grandparents are actually taking on this job anyway, right, in our culture. It's not that, you know, the grandmother is going to be, okay, I'm going to take care of my grandson if they're paying me 300 liras. That is not why they do it, but it still is a good way to compensate for their time and help with their family income. And so there are different ways that governments also can put in regulations, legislation to actually promote gender equality. We talked about the glass ceiling because IPEC brought it to our attention, that equal pay for men and women at the same positions. That's one way of promoting equality. But another way is, since childbirth is going to happen, right, and we want women to have children, we should also help them that women should not be put in positions where they actually have to make this very difficult decision between whether to hold a job versus to have a child. And given how economy is getting more and more difficult, sometimes it is not a choice that the woman works, but to maintain a household, sometimes you need two people working. So the women not working may not be a choice. So we have to think about this as well. Biological influence, another piece of evidence comes from research that actually looks at hormonal abnormalities. And so, for example, we know that androgen levels, prenatal androgen levels, actually are linked to children's activity levels. So pre-birth, those children who have higher androgen levels, which are male hormones, and it could be in females as well, right? It's not like we don't have any androgens, it's just we have less. If they have higher, they actually show play behaviors that include more rough and tumble, more running around in middle school. So there's a biological basis for that kind of activity level. And the play preferences also seem to vary according to these fluctuations. Exceptional sexual development, congenital adrenal hyperplasia, or known as CAH, is basically having more androgen, producing more androgen throughout development. And these girls with CAH have higher activity levels. They prefer boys as playmates. They're interested in masculine careers. There's also another syndrome called the androgen insensitivity syndrome. This is with boys, so this was with girls, where the receptor, so the production of androgen is at normal levels, but the receptors in the body that need to use this androgen is insensitive, so it's not using the androgen that is being produced. And here, if there's full insensitivity in a boy, then some of these boys are actually raised as girls. Doctors and parents get together and make a conscious decision, and there seems to be very little problem with that. These boys find it easy to shift into the female roles. With partial too, there's more of a debate, but usually they're raised as girls too. Again, depending on how much sensitivity they have, this may or may not be the right choice for a child, but usually it seems that the child rearing also channels the child into one or the other gender when biologically the child is actually showing these abnormalities. So where does gender stereotyping come from? Is it God-given? Perceptions and expectations of adults are important. We'll talk about it now. Parents, teachers are among these adults. Observational learning, so children watch others, right? Peers and siblings. So let's start considering them with adults. Adults impose gender expectations based on the stated gender of the baby. And I looked for it and couldn't find it. I actually had a video where what they do is they have the same baby. First, they dress the baby in girls' clothing, and this is a shopping mall. So, you know, a parent, somebody who poses as a parent, takes the baby out on a stroller in a shopping mall, and strangers comment, like as they're in the escalator or something. And it seems like, although it is the same baby, wearing different clothes, just as in this case too, it's the same baby. Strangers use more feminine traits when complimenting on a female baby versus more masculine traits. And they might claim that this little baby looks very clever, he's a smart boy, he's very strong. Whereas with girls, they're more likely to say, oh, what a princess, how cute, beautiful, and all of these things. So we can see that from the beginning, with a kid who actually, at this point in time, gender, just by looking at the face, is very ambiguous. We attach these labels, and a very nice manipulation shows that it's not about the biological makeup of the baby, it's about our perception of what gender this baby belongs to. And so parents also hold different expectations from their own sons and daughters. They react more negatively to the idea of boys behaving in cross-gender ways. We did talk about it. So do parents treat their sons and daughters differently according to their gender? Yes, sometimes in subtle but consistent ways. For example, in infancy and childhood, they may create different play environments for these two kids. They might actually try to create more opportunities for physical play for boys versus girls. They foster independence for boys more. They react more positively to physical activity. Also, boys might be let to wander away from the home more. How many of the ladies here have brothers? Yes. Thinking of your brothers and yourself, unless they're very too much, like you have a lot of age gap between you and your brother is younger, you probably have observed that curfews might be more relaxed for boys. They might be let to come home a little bit later than you do. They might be able to go to a friend's house or play in the next yard over a little bit easier. And so this, not only in our culture, but everywhere else too, it seems to be the case. Parents foster more dependence and closeness for girls. They engage in conversation. They use more emotion words and explanations, although we did not find this in our lab with Turkish mothers and their children. Our Turkish mothers were all middle class. Almost all of them had university education too. So it bears repeating with a more diverse sample before we can generalize our results to all Turkish mothers, obviously. But they direct the play activities of girls more. So they tell the girl what to do in play. Let the boy take leadership. And they provide help, encourage participation. So it seems like these are different types of socialization practices that parents are employing from when children are very young to actually prepare these children for gender roles of their society. In middle childhood and adolescence, we see a continuing demand from boys for independence, and this demand is granted. Parents hold mastery orientation for boys. They care that boys learn, that they try and learn. And so here success is important. They have higher standards. And so there's undue pressure on boys too. And an important example is research from Tenenbaum, which is here on the next slide. And this is interesting because these are mothers. These are not fathers talking to their boys or girls. So when boys are 5 years old or 9 years old. And so this red one is talk about, so they are given, mothers and their children are given magnets to play with, mıknatıs. And so it's like they can build things out of it. The magnets attach together. Some magnets obviously push one another depending on the polarity of the magnet. And so they look at the talk that happens when the parent and the child are playing with these magnets. And what you see here in blue is talk about scientific concepts. So because magnets are kind of not everyday toys, you'd expect that parents will probably explain a little bit about why magnets might attract or repel one another. And so we see the blues here, boys, girls, 5-year-olds, boys, girls, 9-year-olds. Mothers trying to explain the science behind it. The red ones, you might be wondering what these are talk about imaginative uses of magnets. Let's build a castle out of these, let's build a house. So it's not really talking or focusing on the scientific aspect of this material, but focused more on creating a fantasy product out of it. And we see that by 9 years, first off, we see that boys get more talk in this context than girls, right? And they get more science talk at both ages. They actually then get more imaginative talk as well. These are parents. These parents were not selected because they had rigid standards or stereotypes. These parents actually didn't know that they were doing it. If you ask these parents were not people who would endorse rigid stereotypes either. I think what is striking about this research, and there's many variations of this. There's one, for example, more recent one done at science museums for children. So in a science museum for children, they have scientific displays. And it was found that both mothers and fathers actually talk more with their boys than with their girls about the display, right? Again, these are all parents who took the time to take their kids to the science museum. So they are not just parents who are plucked randomly, they already should have a bias to educate their kids. But still, we are seeing these gender differences in how parents talk to their kids of different gender. Okay, so parents, we're still talking about parents have gender-typed expectations of achievement in subject areas. Boys are usually perceived to be less competent at language, but more competent at math. There are also differential maternal expectations for girls as well. And these turn into self-fulfilling prophecies. So children start judging their own competence. Their expectations of themselves vary. And their effort varies, hence their success varies. This is also true, by the way, for teachers too. We will talk about that in a second. Mothers' judgments do not predict their sons' achievement at ages 24, 25, but it predicts girls' self-perception, career choices. In one study, mothers made, in this study, mothers were asked to talk to their children about their elective course choices. This is high school, but the last few years of high school. And it was found that mothers made more discouraging remarks to girls about their competence in science, technology, and math areas. So they discouraged or they used more negative language if their girls, for example, wanted to enroll in a higher calculus course. And basically these remarks were more like, you know it's going to be difficult, honey. But they didn't seem to make these remarks for the boys. Children learn about gender through mother-child conversations. This one actually comes to what I think Ipek said. The child, so this is not a study. This study wasn't done with the intention of looking at gender. This study was just looking at mother-child interactions over storybooks, but what they also did realize that mothers and children were talking in ways that implied gender when they were sharing storybooks, so they looked at it specifically. So these children are 2 years, 4 years, and 6 years of age. The yellow bars are the children, and the red bars are the parents, and they're looking at mean percentage of utterances during storybook conversations. And so this is, again, here looking at these gender stereotyped messages that are coming in, either in the form of girls do this, boys do that kind of thing, or identifying occupations, identifying certain objects as belonging to boys versus girls. And what we see here is that mothers actually do it more often, but as children get older, apparently around 4 years of age, children start producing these and asking questions about them, just like Ipek said, and mothers then come back and respond more. So the mothers' talk also increases. And by 6 years, actually, children are engaging in more gender-typed statements than mothers are. And as you can see, these are sizable, guys. This is 20% of talk. So this is, you don't think of this as 20 sentences. This is 20%, 1/5 of talk then becomes gender-flavored in a way. Okay. Yes. Parents permit different levels of freedom to boys and girls. They use more imperatives and specific suggestions with girls. Imperatives meaning do this, do that, so they're directives. And they let boys travel further without supervision. How about if we had to compare mothers and fathers? Who discriminates more? Mothers or fathers? Fathers actually discriminate more than mothers do. They engage in more physical play with their sons, but there's a lot of cultural variability. For example, in Far Eastern cultures, like Asian cultures, like Chinese, Korean, fathers engage in less physical play versus Western cultures, and they don't seem to show this preference for boys versus girls. Again, always think of culture. Culture is always a variable. At one point in time, physical rough and tumble was seen as male socialization, whatnot, but now recent research is showing a lot of variability in different cultures. So keep that in mind. Fathers ask for gender-appropriate behavior more often, and they set higher goals and standards for their boys as compared to girls. So the expectations are higher. How about teachers? Teachers seem to ask for obedience and discourage assertiveness. This may have negative consequences for both boys and girls. Now, some argue that the classroom is more suited for girls. Girls actually find it easier to succeed in the primary school classroom than boys. because classrooms ask students to sit for 40 minutes, not talk to one another, not talk out of turn. And it seems like girls actually regulate themselves a little bit better. Hence, they get more rewards for this from the teacher too. But on the opposite side, teachers also sometimes do inhibit, without knowing, girls' spontaneity, creativity, assertiveness as well. For example, teachers expect girls to be more dependent on them, so they expect girls to ask more questions, right? They allow greater freedom to boys. Freedom to decide, for example, on a task, not to wander around, but more initiative. They use more gendered language, but with both children, both boys and girls. They interrupt girls more than boys in conversations. Sevgi çok üzüldü. Sevgi is very sad. Okay. It's okay. We survive. They give more attention to boys. But they also discipline boys more harshly, which brings to mind my primary school teacher, Aysel Hanım, and her ruler, right? And it was always meant for one of 3 boys. One of them, his name was, I think, Sinan. And that ruler, when it came out, it was like only for Sinan's hands. She might have gotten mad with a girl too, but she never used her ruler. Yes? So it seems that Aysel Hanım is quite typical in that respect. Whether Sinan deserved it is a different conversation. Gender stereotyping from observational learning. Well, gender-type models are abundant in the community. There are no shortages of them, right? They're in children's books. But if children do get non-stereotyped models in their immediate surrounding, they actually become more flexible and open-minded too. So working moms, moms and dads in different occupations that might cross gender boundaries. And so this is perfect, the amount of time I have. Let's think and talk a little bit about this TED talk. Think about who decides whether a toy should be for a girl or a boy. The producer, whoever produces the product, right? What do they care most about? Selling the product. They sell the product according to either parents' perceptions and their fears, or they may, and usually, manipulate children's biases and tendencies. If young children, 3-, 4-year-olds, are trying to define who they are by gender, so they're learning these binary categories, I'm a boy, I'm a girl. They're feeling membership in a group, and this is cognitively all well, expected and healthy. Then we could manipulate this into producing boys' toys. We are not making them inclination to identify themselves, to sell them more products, which look like it is produced for them. If it were only about color, it wouldn't have mattered, would it? But it also is about content. So building toys, for example, Legos and stuff, can be produced for a boys' market, whereas more princess stuff can be produced for a girls' market. What is interesting is that there was a study recently done by some, you should watch the rest of this. It's very interesting. But I'll use this last 4 minutes shamelessly and selfishly to talk a little bit. So there was a study done on Walt Disney animated movies by linguists. What do linguists do, right? They watch a lot of Walt Disney movies. And what they looked at was the amount of talk from different characters. Male characters, female characters. You know, these are the movies you know. This is Cinderella. This is Snow White, this is Mulan, what else? Beauty and the Beast. And they found that, so in many of these, there are women characters that are at the center, right? Cinderella, for example. It's not really a story about the prince, it's a story about the girl. Snow White. again, it's a story about the girl. I had not watched Mulan by that. Have you guys watched Mulan? Apparently Mulan poses as a boy to get into the army, is it? Yes. I didn't know about this. So they found that actually these characters, the women ones, talk very little. They talk less than the male characters, although the stories are about them. The one that talks most is Mulan, and he poses as a boy. She poses as a boy. The amount of speech from these characters' mouths was so scarce that it made people wonder what kind of messages were in these stories and in these movies for girls and for boys, right? So it seems like women are at the forefront of these stories as central characters, but they have very little agency. And if you think about it, actually, the story of Cinderella is quite funny in the sense that Cinderella doesn't really do anything for her faith, right? Cinderella is kind of the victim of the stepmother and the stepsisters. Then the fairy godmother appears. Fairy godmother gives her these clothes. She can't even manage to come home at the right time, such that, right, she forgets that slipper, and the prince finds her. I mean, she has very little agency in all of this. And I don't know, there's been, I don't know if I'll be able to find this, and I didn't think of looking for it. Let me see if I can find it. What if, is it writing in? İşte. Ne olurdu? What if, imagine God is voting. What if Cinderella was Malaysian? Yes. Well, Cinderella, yes. Yes, so they actually have a book out with women heroes. So if you're interested, you can look it up. Thank you very much. I'll see you on Monday.